Hello and welcome to Kathmandu Triennale 2077's Art Talk for today. Our exhibition has been open from 1st March and will be continued to 31st of March. Today we have our artists Andrew and Thao joining us for the talk program, our Kurakani. We would like to start from Andrew for today's program. For Andrew's short bio, he's known for his iconic visual style. Writer-director Andrew Thomas Huang crafts hybrid fantasy worlds and mythical dreamscapes. A Grammy-nominated music video director, Huang's collaborators FK Twigs and Thom, Yorke, among others. His films have been commissioned by and exhibited at the Museum of Modern Art NY, the Sydney Opera House, and the Museum of Contemporary Art LA. Inspired by his Chinese heritage, where Asian mythology and folklore, Huang is in late development on his first feature film, Tiger Girl, which has received support from Film Independent, SFFILM, Cinereach, and the Sundance Institute. Huang graduated with a degree in fine art and animation from the University of Southern California. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Shall I go ahead and present?
Yeah, please.
Okay, great. I will share screen now. Oops. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be part of the Kathmandu Triennial. What I've seen from a distance looks really beautiful, and I really wish very much I could be there. So thank you so much for including me. Yeah, my background is fine art and animation, puppetry, and I do a combination of film and video art. And so, yeah, I thought the two pieces I'm showing at the Triennial are a piece called East Wind. It's a video installation featuring motion capture lion dance. And then the second piece is a short film called Kiss of the Rabbit God, which is a film I made in 2019. And so I'm going to talk a bit about how I came to these works and my background. I'm third generation American-born Chinese. My grandparents immigrated to the US in the early 1950s, just after the war. My family had a Chinese restaurant for 40 years. And my grandmother here on the right, she's Toisanese. We spoke Say Yep, which is a dialogue near kind of from the Foshan area in Guangdong province. My family never really encouraged me to speak the local dialect. And also I never learned Mandarin because I never related to it, as it wasn't what my family spoke. But I think that this background instilled in me an interest in diasporic and also history. My dad grew up in Chinatown in Los Angeles, and Chinatown actually in LA was originally called China City, and it was actually built just south of where Chinatown is now, and it was actually built from a combination of Hollywood sets from a movie called The Good Earth in the 1930s. And it was also overseen construction from some actual art directors from Hollywood, specifically from Paramount Studios. And so I'm very interested in this idea of Chinatowns across the world being portals of access, but also in a way, the kind of flattening of immigrant culture to become commodified as to serve Westerners or to serve whatever population that these Chinatowns exist in. And so I think this interest comes from my own family's history in the Chinese restaurant business, and also my own, search for identity over the years. One inspiration was a book called Interior Chinatown that actually just came out recently by author Charles Yu, in which he is creating a Chinatown from a screenplay, as if a Chinatowns kind of exist in a perpetual loop or a simulation. And so I'm interested in this idea of Chinatowns being, again, like a place in which chinoiserie, or the commodification Chinese culture can actually become, you know, a material worth unpacking, and it can actually become the fabric of simulation itself. This is actually footage from the association in Chinatown. I remember being a child and seeing line dances, and I thought they were both beautiful and terrifying. And I decided to use my background in animation and visual effects to take this idea and convert lion dance into motion capture. And in 2018 thereabouts, I was approached by a digital arts organization in Shanghai called Output, and they wanted to commission a new work. And so as I set out to create this piece called East Wind, I wanted to work with a local line dance troupe, and I found this organization called I had a connection through my dad, who grew up in Chinatown and knew the owners of this organization. East Wind is actually a nonprofit that was founded to serve the local youth, to give them opportunities to learn martial arts, but also leadership opportunities, and to give just inner city youth opportunity to advance themselves. And so I thought it was really, this organization was founded in 1972. So it's been around for 50 years. And I thought that this was really special, that rather than working with a professional lion dance troupe, I wanted to work with an organization that was specifically designed for you know, young immigrant teenagers, because I think it's important, this idea of body transference and body memory, that like intergenerational knowledge is shared between immigrants and their children, and that the motion capture I'm doing is actually taking from the motion of these young kids. And I think that there's something important about translating their motion into digital form. And so here is actually, these are actually some of the early motion capture tests I was doing to this project, but I wanted to just show what I was doing concurrently at the time, using DIY motion capture at home, and creating these sort of queer avatars. And so I began taking the same technology and applying it to my work with East Wind. Here's a clip of us actually in their rehearsal space. I'm gonna turn this down a bit. This is actually in their auditorium in Chinatown. And I think for this project, it was very important for me to leave the glitches and the imperfections of the motion capture as part of the work. I didn't want to clean it up, and I wanted to make sure that you know, also the avatars here are not rendered. They're straight from the software. And I also wanted to allow room for the offset, the imperfect kind of alignment of these avatars with the video footage. Because I think, again, what interests me is this gap between generations, and this gap between the virtual and the real, I think is what interests me, especially when we consider you know, the transference of again, like cultural knowledge and heritage. There's inevitably a gap that exists, and I think that's really important to this work. And then I also created a companion video piece that goes with that footage. So these videos are kind of intended to exist almost like a diptych. And I was interested in, you know, taking these mythological lions and immortalizing Chinese painting of like misty mountains and celestial deities. And, you know, I was using kind of dirty photogrammetry scans of landscapes to be the backdrop on which these like immortal creatures could exist, and using the imperfections of the scans like you see in the background, you know, as to create that kind of feeling that you have when you look at, you know, Chinese scroll paintings. And I also did the music as well, which I wanted to be again, referential to the glitch aesthetic of this piece. These are just some stills that I also created with the same avatars. And again, kind of embracing the kind of dirty glitch-like nature of what it took to create these. I also use the same technology to collaborate with artist Tianzo Chen and his performance group, Asian Dope Boys. I invited them to my studio and shot them on blue screen and use the same technology to create these sort of like exoskeleton avatar suits. And we actually ended up premiering this work at the Venice Biennial. At the Venice Biennial in 2019 through the Farshu Foundation. It became a 2-part triptych. And again, to create these avatars, I used Tang Dynasty ceramics as inspiration for the avatars and placed them in a kind of like Chinese hell. But I'm really interested in the idea of like the commercial landscape of Southern California, in which so many Chinese diaspora live, specifically in the San Gabriel Valley. It's just a very, suburban commercial neighborhood with a lot of strip malls. And I wanted and use it to create sort of like a Chinese purgatory for these gods to inhabit. So again, I'm kind of taking this idea of American Southern California landscape and turning it into a realm for Chinese gods to exist. And as I move on to talk about my next piece, around this time I was in Mexico City and I saw a beautiful exhibit on the god Xochipilli, who's the Aztec god of flowers and the patron saint of homosexuality. And I thought it was just a really beautiful exhibition, and also was really thinking about this deity, and it made me wonder about instances of queer mythology in Chinese culture and in Sino mythology. So I was inspired to do research, and I found the rabbit god, Tuer Shen, who's actually a fictional character invented by the poet painter Yuan Mei, who was known for writing really transgressive literature, and also being a feminist of the time. And I was just really inspired that this fictional deity has become a real god that is worshipped in New Taipei City in Taiwan, and which you see here on the right. And the legend is a Fujianese soldier was caught spying on his male lover and condemned to death. And when his soul went to hell, the Chinese, the officials of hell deemed that his crime of love was should be forgiven, and that he should be ordained as a rabbit god, or a god of queer love. And so in 2018, 2019, I was asked by a London platform called Nowness to create a film, and they wanted me to create a piece about the queer Asian experience. And I think I felt like I wanted to somehow tell like a spiritual fantasy in which this deity visits a Chinese restaurant worker and encourages him to go on a journey of sexual awakening. And it was very much inspired by my family's history in the restaurant business. My mom, again, ran our business for many decades, and I was just inspired by the sacrifices she made and thinking about her spiritual life. And so I kind of invented an analogous story about a Chinese busboy who meets this god. And so in order to film this, I had to research restaurants around Los Angeles that would let us shoot, because many Cantonese restaurants around Los Angeles are dying out, especially, I mean, there are more Mandarin speaking restaurants, but I really, as a Cantonese restaurant that we, since my family had a Cantonese restaurant, it was very important for our location to kind of feel similar to what my family had. So we finally found this great location. And again, kind of thinking about this idea about chinoiserie and the flattening of culture and the commodification of Chinese culture. And at the same time, you know, it still being rich with history and rich with mythology. And so I wanted this to be the setting of this story. And these are just some production sketches that I did with my cinematographer, Rena Yang. When I plan a shoot, we always do these overhead drawings, and I wanted all the dressing that you see on the left to be, you know, a recreation of what my family used to have. And I also, every time I plan my scenes, I always plan what's in the background, midground, and foreground, because I want there to be multiple layers of activity and telling this story, and for the god's presence in this film to be a constant portal from this world into another. These are just some behind the scenes photos. So this is like a comparison of that drawing and what you see now here in the finished film. We actually shot this scene in broad daylight. We had to create a tent off of the street, and you know, so this was a very low budget production. So you know, we had to use many tricks to get our scenes. And I also wanted the story to conclude with basically a sex scene, but I didn't want to present it in the traditional sense. I wanted to present it in a spiritual way. And so I created this void for this spiritual kind of embodiment to take place. And I worked with a local artist named Tanya Melendez, who created these beautiful adornments for the god. And this is my cinematographer, Rena Yang, who was such a close collaborator on this. And I also wanted the symbology of the film to be really heavily researched. I wanted there to be a mandala on the god's chest. And one of my favorite poets is William Blake, and his one line, "Eternity is in love with the productions of time." It's been a favorite quote of mine for many years. And I thought, well, if this is the god of queer love, and maybe this is the perfect quote that I could somehow translate into the form of a mandala. So this is like Chinese steel script with the symbol for immortality in the center, surrounded by the symbol for love, and then the symbol for bats at the very perimeter for good luck. And so my story is that every time the rabbit god was died and fell in love and was reincarnated, each one of these kind of represents a reincarnation of this deity over time. And so no one will know this, but I think it's important that people feel that there's a universe beyond just what they're seeing. And this was also, you know, again, the symbology here on the main character's pelvis is the double happiness symbol, which I'm not normally very comfortable with blood, but I've been thinking a lot about how because I don't speak the language, I think flesh and blood is the one connection I have to my heritage as a third generation Chinese American. And I think that blood is the life force that kind of ultimately brings like this character into being by the end of the film. And so that's kind of the reason for some of the decisions of the film, was to highlight this idea that of embodiment, and again, body transference from one person to another. We actually premiered the film at Tribeca, a film festival in New York, and also had an LA screening, which this photograph is from, where we created an altar. And it was one of the first times that I was able to commune with the queer Asian community in Los Angeles. It was a really special night, and it ended up being the first time that a lot of my queer Asian community met and organized. And since then, they've created a regular nightlife in Los Angeles for queer Asians. And so I'm really happy that the film has had this impact. And I also had the privilege of screening the film at Parasite in their exhibition, Garden of Six Seasons, curated by Cosmin Costinus. So I was just very happy that this film has been able to show not just in North America, but also in Asia. And I also have been really like happy to see the internet respond as well with all this fan art of the rabbit god. And so I think that in a way, like I intentionally wanted the rabbit god to have a K-pop sensibility. And I think that that's made the film art that people can touch and respond to. And lastly, I was the Rabbit God Temple in Taiwan found the film and invited me on Facebook to come screen it at the temple. So I had the honor of visiting the temple for real back in the end of 2019. And it was also very educational for me because I was able to see, meet the temple master in person, and who also educated me a bit on, on this rabbit god. And I think it was interesting to me, I think, how the film was sort of received differently in a place in Taiwan where homosexuality and queerness is more celebrated. And it was also just interesting, I think, because I think as someone American born, I think there is a racial component to the film that is, I think, a subtext for those of us who are minorities here in the West. But I think in Taiwan, it maybe wasn't it wasn't received the same. And it really was eye-opening for me, but also very humbling. And the temple master said that the rabbit god was the one who summoned me there, and he was the reason why I made, he's the one that came to me to make the film for him. And so it was just really humbling, and I was very happy to screen the film there. And so that is my presentation. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Andrew. That was a really insightful visit to your work and process. Next, we have Thảo Nguyên Phan. She's trained as a painter. Phan is a multimedia artist whose practice encompasses video, painting, and installation. Drawing from literature, philosophy, and daily life, she observes ambiguous issues in social conventions and history. She started working in film when she began her MFA in Chicago. In addition to her work as a multimedia artist, she is co-founder of the collective Art Lever, which explores cross-disciplinary practices and develops art projects that benefit the local community. Thảo is expanding her theatrical fields, including what she calls performance, gesture, and moving images. Welcome, Thảo. We can start the presentation.
Hello, and let me share my screen. Okay, so I'm very honored to be invited to the Kathmandu Triennale, and even though I'm not like physically there, just seeing images from the exhibition makes me very happy. And now I'm gonna present two of the video works that I show in the Triennale. One is a single channel video piece called Becoming Alluvium. And the second work that I show is a 3-channel video installation called Mood Grain. So maybe talk a bit about my background. I was born and grew up in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. And interestingly, I also have a part of Chinese heritage because my grandfather from my mother's side is from Teochew. But my mom growing up with a Vietnamese mother and a Chinese father, so she only speak Vietnamese. I was trained as a painter in the Ho Chi Minh University of Fine Arts in Vietnam before I came to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where I was still major in painting, but then I started to become very interested in moving image, installation, and video art. And I have been making a way of making work is a combination of paintings, installation, and videos. So in the presentation, I can also share with you some of the installation shots where I combine both of my painting works and my video works. So for Becoming Alluvium, I make the film started in 2019, and the way I make the video is I keep changing and keep editing them. So every time I show it, it's like a new reincarnations of the video. So I thought of the video as endless reincarnations, and they don't have like a very solid ending. So Becoming Alluvium is a video piece that talk about the somewhat ecological issues in Southeast Asia and beyond, especially in the region that share the Mekong River. So the Mekong River is the largest river, one of the largest river in the world. And it started from the Tibetan Plateau, and it ran through Yunnan in China, and it came downstream to Burma, to Thailand, to Laos, Cambodia, and it ended in Vietnam before the river goes to the Pacific Ocean. So in Vietnam, the rice is a very big rice cultivation country. And where I live is the south of Vietnam, which is very close to the Mekong Delta. And the Mekong Delta is like the largest rice basket of the country. And Vietnam, from a very, would say, underdeveloped country, since we have a very long subsidized period. We have the reformation in 1986 when the country started to open economically for trade and foreign investment. Since then, thanks to the Mekong Delta, Vietnam has become one of the largest rice exporter in the world. But somehow, this kind of achievement is for me problematic because um, the kind of impact, environmentally impact that has on the production of agriculture, also for urbanism. So in recent years, there was a lot of dam buildings that for hydropower that was constructed on the Mekong River, started from China to Laos to downstream to Thailand and Vietnam. And these dam buildings, even though it's kind of push for economic development, of course, for electricity, that's the kind of brightness that everybody wants. But it's really can't block the water from the river to go downstream. And other issues like sand mining for construction of big cities also affecting the river. And those kind of the reasons that give me the urgency to talk about those issues in a very poetic way in the video. So Becoming Alluvium is the narrative of the film is about siblings, like two little boys, and because of the destruction of one of the dam was broken during construction in Laos, and the dam broke, and it flooded one village, and many people passed away during this accident. And I have inspired by this tragic accident. And in the video, I invented characters, which is two boys. They are siblings. They passed away during the accident, but then they reincarnate into different lives, such as one reincarnated into Irrawaddy dolphin, one of the very well-known and famous fish in the Mekong River, but now almost extinct. And the other is reincarnated into a water hyacinth. And I combine the narrative. The first part of the film is more documentary, in which I reference many books from a French writer named Marguerite Duras, who during the French colonial time grew up in the Mekong Delta in Vietnam and wrote very beautiful, poetic, but also romantic novels about the Mekong River and about life in the Mekong Delta. Somehow her voice becomes the literature voice, when we try to know the experience living in the Mekong Delta. And for me, it was kind of problematic because there are no literature or folklore from natively inside the region to talk about this, but we kind of have to borrow the voice from a French woman in order to describe the experience living here. And also in the video, I also use other literary sources, such as a part talk about cities that keep consuming and discarding garbages, and in the end, the garbages is just become overwhelming. And I use that part in Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino to have illustrate the longing and the hope for consuming that is overwhelming for this river. And there was a part in Becoming Alluvium that in the end of the video, it becomes more fantastical. Like the first part was more like documentary, and the second part was an animation. And the animation is made simply by me making watercolors. And I would have these watercolors on top of the engravings. That, as you can see, like the engravings are, I took them from the engravings from a French explorer. His name is Louis de la Pote, and together with other French explorers, those are in the 19th century, they make exploration. They call it the Mekong Exploration Commission, and their mission was to find the source of the Mekong. So from Saigon, they went to Cambodia, where they was very great admirer of Angkor Wat. So the engravers in the video that I took the drawings from, he actually becomes a collector of Khmer art, which many of his items in his collection now is in the Museum Guimet in Paris. And then they came up to Laos and Burma, and they came to Yunnan in China, but they couldn't go to Tibet because the current of the river was too difficult, and then they can't give up the commission. But I also somehow invented another character, which is based a headless woman figure that is based on the first inspiration comes from the Khmer and Champa statues in the collection of the Museum Guimet in France. When I came there, I was wondering why many of the items, they only have the bodies, but they don't have heads. And some of the items, the heads are separated from the bodies. For example, the Buddha heads or the deities heads are separated from their bodies. And I was just wondering why these items ends up in an institution in Europe in these separated ways. So I just curious about if the items were traded, if they were looted, or if they have to have adapt to a certain market for these items, that they become just bodies without identities. And this image on the left-hand side is an image of a woman fighter, a communist woman fighter in the Mekong Delta. So she was very typical outfit for the communist fighter in this region during the Vietnam War from the 50s to 1975. And this outfit is somehow, for me, also an interesting hybrid, because the dress is considered local, but it's also an influence from Peranakan dressing from Malaysia, and the headscarf is Khmer, but it is a Vietnamese woman. So somehow there is a kind of cultural influx into the Mekong Delta that makes new identities. So in the animation, I create this headless character that is a Khmer princess, and she wants to have jewelry made from dew. And because this narrative is based on a Khmer folklore that I read about, also a Khmer princess that wanted so bad jewelry made from dews, and then she was asking everyone, the most talented goldsmith in the nation, to make it. But of course, it's impossible. It's a vain wish. So in my video, I invented the character, and also in the end of the story, the princess met a Buddhist monk who kind of tell her and make her realize that wish to have jewelry made from morning dew is just vain wishes and it's impossible. So in the end, the princess became the dew herself, and she evaporated into the Mekong River. For me, as a metaphor for human ambition to kind of overwhelm and control nature, but somehow I want to propose like a more balanced way of seeing these issues, and just the hope to possess and just the hope to take advantage would be just vain and would be unsuccessful. And the video comes with a series of lacquer and silk paintings. So I just want to show one of them that accompany the video. I didn't show this work in Kathmandu, but I just think it would be interesting materials to see. The way I work is always a combination of the painting and the video. So the standing panels has the front is lacquer, like Vietnamese lacquer, with eggshell. Lacquer is a sap of the lacquer tree that we use to cover household objects like bowls, or religious objects like Buddha statues in the temples. But it's become a fine art materials after the French colonial school in the 20s introduced it into a fine art practice. So one side is the lacquer painting depicting the one part of the Mekong River, and then the other side of the standing screens are watercolor on silk depicting my calm narrated imagination about life in the Mekong River. And I would like to have link to my second video works that I show as in Kathmandu Triennale. And this is the 3-channel video installation, and it is called Migraine. And the video is based on is my personal research and my personal reflection on a specific event that happened during the Japanese occupation in Indochina. It was the Vietnam famine from 1944 to 1945 that believed to cause the death of 2 million Vietnamese people in the north of Vietnam in the Red River Delta. And somehow this particular history is very rarely mentioned in official or standardized history in Vietnam. So as when I was studying, I have no idea about if this particular event actually happened. But then I started to see literature works and folklore that talk about this event. So somehow in my work, there is always a combination of seeing history as fiction, things that is official record in history needs to be questioning. So sometimes I feel like fiction, literature, arts, and folklore have a more interesting way of understanding truth that rather than official history. So in this video piece, it is a story of also a siblings named March and August. And March and August is their names are taken from a saying called that March and August are like the poorest month of the lunar calendar because as a rice production country, we have two main rice seasons: the winter, summer seasons, and the autumn and the summer autumn seasons for 2 seasons of rice production per year. So during March and in August, when the rice on the paddies are not ripened yet, and the rice in the storage already ran out. So those are the times when farmers have to struggle to find food and have to borrow money in order to survive. So in the video, in the video, August, the little sister passed away, and March, the older brother, kept looking for her soul. So in Vietnamese belief, I think it also applied to other countries in East Asia. We believe that when a person passed away, and if the person passed away by an accident or by an unjustified death, in this case, because of famine, he or she will wander on this earth for 49 days before he or she can reincarnate and go on into other life. And the video is kind of happening in these 49 days of the soul of August wandering, and March was looking to meet to encounter with this wandering spirit. And during the research, the only kind of visual references that I found about the famine is a group of photographs by a quite well-known Vietnamese photographer during wartime and during colonial time. His name is Võ An Ninh, and he took pictures of the famine victims during this period. And I think this is the only record that I have seen physically about this event. And in the videos, I also opened the videos with like a series of these archive photographs, but then they are laid on top of them are my own watercolors depicting happy and well-fed children. So it's like the dream and the reality are like very different, but they kind of overlay each other. And somehow, because of the lack of information about the famine in Vietnam, I started to reference others famines in history that somehow, even though very distant, but for me has a kind of direct relationship to what's going on in Indochina, can also be experienced in Bengal during the British colonial rule, for example. So I've referenced drawings by Shreeti Prajapati from depicting the Bengal famine in 1943, for example. And in my videos, I also, the opening sequence in Migraine also reference one of the very well-known literature works, Adnan Damas, that depicting the famine in Bengal in the 18th century. But somehow in the video, it doesn't really just talk about the historical event. There is ways of seeing that poetry and hope still exist in those hard times. So I also use other literary reference. One of them is among my favorite writer, the writing of the Japanese writer Yasunari Kawabata, who depicts very mundane, poetic observation of life. And I have a group of children kind of reenact and perform these references that I take from oral history, from official history, and from literature. And this series also comes with a series of silk paintings, watercolor on silk, and they are called Dream of March and August. And it's also for me a reference to one of the literary works that I really like from China. It's called Dream of the Red Chamber. And these paintings are in pairs, and one painting would depict March and one painting would depict August. And somehow they're in a very happy landscape, a landscape of no trauma. So the audience, when they enter the exhibition space, they would walk through these paintings before they encounter the video installation, which is a lot more graphic and a lot more kind of talking about a traumatic experience. And I think that's pretty much how I constructed.
Thank you, Thao. That was really poetic and powerful. Knowing the process of both of your videos, I think it was really wonderful. I have just a bit of a question for both of you. For Andrew, I would like to ask you, Like we see this, chaos used to show the conflict within the person in your Kiss of Rabbit God, yes, and the use of knife over the length of the movie to show how he's afraid to open up about his sexuality, and with time he becomes comfortable in his skin and accepts his sexuality. And how easy or difficult it is to narrate a story, especially a very sensitive subject like this one, through metaphors for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I don't know. I wrote 18 drafts of the short film before making it, and it was a process of finding the right visual symbols. Um, I have a painting background, and I think it has helped the film to tell it in images. And I think when you're telling a short story, you have to resort to imagery and symbolism to communicate bigger ideas very quickly. So I think that and then there's also choosing symbols that maybe I'm not comfortable with. I wasn't sure how to end the film for a while, and I felt though that if this film is about, it's not a love story. I didn't want to make a love story. I wanted to make a film about someone stepping into their being for the first time. And I feel like the only way to inhabit his body is to kind of literally go through one's flesh, to use a knife. And it felt maybe like the right, I think that there is it felt like the right kind of poetic device, I think. And I think, so I think in a way, making a short film is kind of like writing poetry, where you have to be very succinct and you have to find the right symbols. So definitely takes a reiterative process of rewriting and reimagining in order to find the right choice.
And also, like both of your work process has included folklores, part of literatures in your work, imbibing them into your works. So, because your works are very soulful and poetic, how do you work with the process of, working with maybe loss and memory into these poems in your stories?
The mention of folklore is very relevant. I think I also see that in Andrew's work. And I realized that even though I grew up in Vietnam, but the kind of education that I receive is very westernized and somehow based on a kind of colonial legacy. So I can easily approach like a literary works from the West, such as American or European literature. But the folklore tradition from the neighboring countries very close to Vietnam, such as Laos or Cambodia, or further like India or Nepal, is very distant because I just have no resources to kind of approach them like in the school textbook. They would not mention them, even though similar, like culturally, we are sharing very similar things. So in the work, somehow I did my own research. It's a way of to re-educate myself from a self that is admiring and live in this culture that has a colonial background into some new way of thinking about getting knowledge. And this knowledge could be from the Western canons. I'm not rejecting this, but also there are other um, available wonderful works from from the tradition of folklore all over the world, and from the arts and culture of uh, nations or from other culture background that is considered inferior because those countries doesn't have the money to promote the culture, for example. But these are for me more interesting now because they're very authentic and somehow related so well to the specific history and context of my country.
Thank you. If we have any questions, we can take questions, even from our team members as well, and from Facebook.
I have a question for Andrew.
Yeah.
I'm very curious about the characters that you make virtually for your videos and for your artworks, like because visually they are so beautiful, but also very interesting. And I just wonder, how do you come up with this visual style and how you connect it to your heritage? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Thảo. By the way, your presentation was so beautiful, and I relate very much to I grew up consuming so much Western media, and so I think I've spent my adulthood trying to undo, or at least research, other ways of representing bodies and characters. And so I think I do a lot of drawing as well, and I think that I try to find my designs for the avatars and things through drawing, but also through research. Like again, for the piece I did with Tianzhou Chen, I used Tang Dynasty ceramics as an inspiration. So I think, as someone just who's so divorced from my heritage, I think a lot of my designs now are drawn from that research and trying to reconnect. And at the same time, some of it is just pure invention and just making things up as I go. So sometimes it's unconscious and sometimes it is very like research heavy. But yeah, I think now, and I think for the Rabbit God, I did try to read as many original sources as I could about the Rabbit God. Again, because I don't speak Chinese, I was limited to English translations, but I tried to make sure that some choices were based on the folklore, So yeah, it's a combination of research and making it up as I go. Yeah, thank you so much for asking.
So first of all, I would really like to say thank you to both of you. Through your presentations and the works that you have displayed in different venues, we get to see so much of the effort that you have put in unlearning and learning the cultures we have embedded throughout our lives. I see all of your videos and Thao's videos, especially with the the famine, how hopeful you have presented with the lights, and with Andrew's videos. The vibrancy of our culture is seen through your videos that I really liked. Hopefully we can explore more of our heritages than just the learnings we have from of our culture and of our roots. I think that is more important. And also the part of the Triennale, also how we have come up to explore these subjects. So I would like to thank you all. If we have come to end of the questions, then I would like to end our meeting for today. And thank you both of you and all the viewers for joining in for this talk program. It was really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.